Right, I'm just going to preface this before we start in saying this video might get a little bit spicy, and that probably depends largely on your definition of spicy. But it will almost definitely contain some takes that you're going to disagree with, and that's okay. Because discussions like the one that we're about to have are kind of naturally biased, based on the fact that, you know, we only have our own lens to go by through which to make these observations. And so it's a good opportunity for you to maybe drop a comment below and we can talk about and discuss things. So I've decided that I want to talk today about 3 particular things that I feel like we kind of get wrong in our hobby. Some of these are points of law, some of them are more practical concerns or personal concerns, but all of them are things that I think maybe we could stand to understand a little more, maybe talk about a little more, maybe not, you know, be so memey about. So I wanted to open up with one that, kind of regardless of who you are, probably affects you to some degree, or you have some sort of stake in to some degree. You probably know already by the framing of this video which side I land on here. Wargaming is, without a doubt, my longest standing hobby in my life, and yeah, it's definitely not cheap. I mean, I'm not out here trying to make any wild claims, but I have had other hobbies, and to be entirely honest with you, Wargaming is on the cheaper end of them. I've played a lot of music over the years. A lower end for a decent guitar or bass setup, or a drum kit for that matter, is probably 600 to 800 quid. And of course, no one stops at just one. I've also played a lot of Magic the Gathering over the years, and that's a game where a single game piece can cost thousands. Some folks are into motorcycles, some folks are into fishing, and those things are expensive too, and that's kind of the point, is that it's sort of all relative. I think the debate that war games are expensive kind of stems from the fact that Warhammer is the most visible of the war games. Because let's be honest, love it or not, Warhammer is fucking expensive. But like, compared to 40k, with, you know, a starting sort of cost for an army, or an average sort of cost for an army being 300 to 600 quid for 2,000 points. Basically every other war game, pretty much, seems cheap as chips in comparison. I mean, Battletech starter box is 60 quid, and it has 2 complete ready-to-play forces in it out of the box, for like a full-size normal game. Infinity's another one, unsurprisingly. They offer full, exhaustive boxed collections that come complete with a rulebook, that have like everything for Code 1 for that army. And it's like a little over 200 quid. And that's not like an army, that's more than an army. That's everything you could need for Code 1. So yeah, instead of Wargaming is expensive, I feel like this one kind of needs to be revised to Warhammer is expensive, because that is a difference. And if you're the kind of person who doesn't like Warhammer being spoken about in not the brightest and shiniest of lights, this is probably not the first time they're going to come up during this video. So you might want to go grab some rotten fruit to pelt the screen with now. Joke's kind of on you, because, you know, fruit juice and monitors don't really mix well. Okay, this one brutally hurts as an Infinity player, because my game of choice has a at least somewhat deserved reputation for being brutally complex. And it's a double pain whammy for me too, because my second game, Battletech, is the game that spawned these memes based on its box arts. But for every time I see people talking about over complexity in games, I don't tend to really see much talk about how to mitigate that or any counterpoints to that. It kind of seems to be a bit of a one-sided conversation. It's just Battletech is too complicated, or Infinity is too complicated, etc, etc, etc. And Battletech is actually a great example, because the big hurdle in that game is really figuring out how to write a list. There's like multiple different agreed upon points values. Then you have things like era, tech base, tonnage limits. It's a lot to figure out from the outside. But the thing is, there are great apps like Mech Factory, for example, or websites like the Master Unit List that, whilst community driven, and I personally believe that that should never really be a thing, game companies should themselves make the information to play their games available, but it does massively simplify the process. And as for the infinity problem, don't even get me... Well, no, it's my video. I am started now. Okay, let's talk about the infinity problem. When I first got into Infinity, it used to really frustrate me that the existing, experienced player base seemed to really not care for Code 1 and were just teaching new players to play using the full N4 rule set. The thing is, Infinity has a lot, and I do mean a lot, of keyword-based rules, and expecting a new player to even memorise the core ones, the most frequently used ones, is a pretty big ask. It's quite the feat of memory. But the actual core system underneath that, the operating mechanics of the game at a base level, are actually really simple, typical wargaming stuff that pretty much anyone can probably grasp. Infinity's problem, and I promise we will get back to Code 1 in just a second, but Infinity's problem is really that, at least the way Corvus Belli communicates to its English-speaking audience, isn't always very effective. Now, in saying that, I'm not saying it's a language-based problem specifically, but I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know if the problem carries over into the Spanish translations and therefore is a general problem, or whether it's only seen in the English translations. But based on what I'm about to say, you'll see why I have my suspicions that it is a language problem. Because you see, for the English-speaking part of the player base, Corvus Belli's communications can sometimes seem maybe a little hard to follow, maybe a little inaccurately or poorly translated. Code 1 specifically, told you we'd get back. Also, thanks to Deck at the Corner Case for bringing this up. He's actually who inspired this part of the discussion, and I will link his channel in the description below, so please do check him out. He's a great new YouTuber. But Code 1, thanks to kind of how Corvus Belli puts it across, doesn't really come over as an onboarding platform for teaching people N4. Instead, it kind of comes across and is almost marketed more like an admission from Corvus Belli that N4 is too complicated and like impossible for noobs to grasp or something, which is obviously, from both a marketing perspective and as a true reflection of the game, really not a great idea. As I said previously, the core mechanics of Infinity are honestly pretty straightforward wargame stuff that basically anyone can grasp. And really that complexity, or at least the bulk of that complexity, comes in from how many different keywords there are. But the thing is, and what maybe isn't clear to outsiders and should be far clearer to outsiders, Infinity's designed from the ground up to be played with the app in hand. And within that app, every single one of those keywords is hyperlinked directly to the official wiki, which is maintained with the latest rules. So rules lookups in Infinity take seconds, not minutes. Let's not even get started on how hard it is to play 40k in the prescribed way. I mean, you're all out here using 2 different community-created resources in order to have a half-decent chance of playing a game in a fairly accessible way. That's a mess. And like, compared to what's available in other games, both Battlescribe and Wahapedia really don't function that well. They're not shining examples of how that format can work by any measure. And again, that's not really a criticism because they're community made by people that are volunteering, and that should never be the case. The company making the game should be making the rules accessible. But like, the official Warhammer app is, I mean, it's borderline unusable, and the whole thing is paywall city. You have to buy a physical book and redeem a code in order to be able to have digital access to the rules required to play the game. Like, do they not want you to play it? Are you not allowed? That's actually kind of true. You're not allowed unless you're willing to buy into the ecosystem, and that's really the big problem there. But to be honest, it's also kind of unsurprising that it's all a bit of a mess in 40k land. The game has so many factions, and each of them has so many uniquely worded abilities, even though they're kind of the same thing. Like, Infinity does this whole symmetry thing, where the ability is called the same thing regardless of who has it. In Warhammer, that doesn't happen. You will get exactly the same ability in its rules text, but it will have two completely different names. And that's because they use the rules to kind of generate this false impression of faction identity, where like the complexity is tied into what makes the faction fun. And this creates a paradigm where people actually resist having the game less overly complex, which plays perfectly into the hands of a company that wants to sell you rulebooks, right? I mean, I've said it before, GW is nowadays a publishing company that has a side hustle in miniatures, and I firmly believe that to be the truth. The thing is though, all of that is probably a separate point, to be honest, and could even be a separate video. Let me know if you want to see that. But yeah, most wargames that people say are complicated aren't actually that complicated at all. And the one that everyone plays the most, the one that's the most subscribed to, is probably the most complicated one. It just has a clearer onboarding system, a clearer progression system, and so people can penetrate that complexity more easily. As usual, Games Workshop are the masters of marketing. So before I get to my final point, which is kind of both the most and least serious at once, stay tuned for that, I just want to take a minute to ask you if you've enjoyed this video. Because if you have, there are ways that you can feed that back to me by clicking the like button below the video, by maybe subscribing to the channel. And if you really enjoy the content that I'm making over here, do be sure to check the description of this video, where you'll find a link to my Patreon. You can get some amazing benefits and support the creation of this content for as little as £1 a month. So if you're the kind of person who likes to watch wargaming YouTube videos, there's probably a pretty good chance you've heard this debate before. Somebody will say, inevitably, in discussion about 40k, everyone's a bad guy in 40k. And before that person's even had a chance to draw their next breath, someone chimes in with, not Tyranids or not orcs. And I'll be honest, forgive me in advance here, but this kind of really annoys me because it shows a level of willful ignorance that I just don't expect to see from grown adults. Like, if you truly think that Tyranids and orcs are not bad guys, you're either just memeing, which is kind of fine, but also kind of not, more on that shortly, or you just have no understanding of the setting of 40k. So is that a little bit blunt? Well, yeah, probably, and I'm not out here to hurt anyone's feelings. That's not what I'm trying to do. But there is some stuff to break down here that maybe explains why this annoys me so much. And if you follow my train of thought, you might understand what I'm getting at. First of all, the memeing. And I'll be honest, I can be a bit of a meme lord myself, so I kind of have a horse in this race. Now and again, I'll say something jokingly, being memey, and people will take it seriously. And I have to kind of explain the meme to them, which is awkward, obviously, but explaining the meme is definitely the right thing to do in that situation. Because there's people out there that don't explain the meme, they propagate the meme as if it's truth, and then less informed people start to believe that the meme is accurate, is actually a representation of how it is. And I sort of think that's where we're at with this whole 40k bad guy debate. So look, let's get to the point very quickly here. Everyone in 40k is a bad guy. That's literally the point of the setting. It's a satire of the worst elements of sentient life. Even if Games Workshop do kind of forget that sometimes. Space Marine heroes. Tyranids, according to the meme, are not evil, they're just hungry. And this is like hair-pullingly frustrating. The hive mind is on some level a self-aware being. It is strategic, it has goals. Why did I say goals so weirdly then? Goals. As part of that goal, it wholesale consumes all biomass, read as life, in its path, selfishly killing everything around it in order to further its own goal, with no respect for the sanctity or value of the lives of other sentient beings. Tyranids are, when you actually break it down, probably the most evil faction in 40k. At least other factions can claim miseducation or stupidity. They're rampaging murderers fueled only by self-fulfilling desire. Yes, the individual creature doing the murdering in most cases isn't personally to blame, but that's like saying if I flew a drone into your greenhouse, I'm not personally expected to pay for the glass. Of course I am. And then we come to the orcs, the other perennial wannabe good guys in the 40k universe. And this one's actually kind of even less excusable in some ways. Let me break that down. Orcs might well be stupid, and violence might well be part of their normal everyday way of living, but they're also fucking slavers. They literally invade planets, conquer them, chain up the population, and force them to do hard labor until they die of exhaustion. And I'm pretty sure that historically we don't tend to view that as good guy behaviour. Even the other side of their personality, the football hooligan thing, is based on a culture that is universally reviled by everyone that isn't a member of it. I get that some people really don't want to feel like the faction that they love are bad guys. There are people that really want the models they play on the table to align with their real life morals. That's fine. Of course, that's a great thing. But it's also not the only reason to choose to play with specific danger dollies, right? It's not the be-all and end-all of wargaming. I mean, if that were the case, how would anybody play Italy, Japan, or Germany in bolt action? And I'll be the first to admit, regardless of reasoning and feelings, I will die on a burning pyre before I paint or play against a swastika on any miniature. But at the same time, that's kind of a me reasoning as to why I don't go for those kind of games personally. But it's not the only reason to be attached to an army. The point is, your minis don't have to be good guys for you to like them. You can like the design aesthetic, you can like the storytelling in their lore, you can like the mechanical playstyle of how they are on the table. There are lots of reasons to like armies in games beyond what they stand for from a political perspective. I just feel like sometimes we have this like, oh look, it's me but in plastic attitude towards selecting our models. And that's probably a little bit unhealthy and really just not a great way to get fulfillment from a game. I feel so much lighter after getting all that off my chest. Those three are definitely my personal pet peeves in the world of wargaming misconceptions. But I'd be very interested to know what yours are. Why don't we take this as an opportunity to have a good, healthy vent in a place where we can just be reasonable with each other. Drop a comment below and have a little rant about what your least favourite wargaming misconception is. Feels pretty good to talk about it. And of course, until next time folks, as usual, I'd like to thank you for watching and wish you happy hobbying. I will see you in the next one. So bye bye for now.